When Formula One had its first official season in 1950, there were 6 total races that counted towards the championship. In 2023, we had a total of 23 races, from which one was cancelled due to the flooding in the Emilia-Romagna region. In 2024, there are scheduled 24 races on the F1 calendar, which is the most in championship history. In theory, we always love having races to watch, but at what point does it become too much? Fans and drivers have been complaining about the F1 calendar for years, and frankly, their complaints are valid. Formula One drivers are professional athletes, so you expect them to be able to perform at very high levels for a very extended period of time. But to put into perspective, the Formula One season now spans from March all the way to mid-December, with a 1-month break for summer in August. Add to their grueling schedules the fact that they have to travel back and forth between 19 different countries. Their complaints start to make sense. They have every right to be vocal about their issues with the calendar because there are big problems with the F1 calendar. Before we dive into those problems, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to help me out by liking and subscribing to my channel. Done? Let's go. The main reason many drivers have complaints about the Formula One season is simply due to the length. Although they are doing what they love, these drivers and all the team members alongside them are working. Imagine being on the road, living out of your suitcase for 10 months every single year. Sure, they are nice hotels and they do get breaks in between, but the simple length of the calendar is excruciating. Logistically speaking, anytime there is a race weekend in a particular country, the teams and drivers have to be there at least a couple of days beforehand. The teams have to set up the garages, prepare the cars, and get everything in place for the race weekend. Starting on Friday, the cars are out on track, so even drivers have to be prepared days before to go through their training process and be caught up to speed. This becomes even more exhausting when there are 2 or 3 races in consecutive weekends. In these circumstances, teams have no time off at all. Right when a race is finished in one country, they quickly pack everything up and have to begin setting up at the next race location on the very next day. Now, when team members are tired, mistakes happen. Mistakes from drivers, from engineers, from any member of the team basically. Burnout also comes as a byproduct just as with any other job. And unfortunately, there is no one else to blame for this except the F1 calendar, which demands high level of focus for so long. Another massive problem with the F1 calendar is the logistical problems that come with it. F1 races in 5 continents, which is absolutely crazy to think about. But the way these races are spread out throughout the world is a nightmare. Every spring, when we are racing in Europe, we decide to hop on a plane to Canada for one weekend, just to fly back for Europe the next weekend. A couple races before, we fly over from Azerbaijan to the States, only to fly back to Europe. Later on, we fly from Italy to Singapore to Japan, then back to Qatar, then back to the States, and so on and so on and so on. You get the point. A lot of traveling back and forth, not always with a logical path. Of course, some of these races have to be held at specific time points due to temperature issues, but even so, there needs to be a better way. Some tracks are forced to be at specific times due to deals that they have in place with Formula One, such as Bahrain being the first race and Abu Dhabi being the last race of the season, meaning they couldn't do all of the Middle Eastern races at the same time, even if they wanted to. Now, I must add that F1 are trying to at least fix some of these issues, having moved the Qatar Grand Prix, for example, from the midpoint of the season to the very end, right before the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, to help alleviate some of the traveling. But the fact that there are still 3 races in the States and they aren't even remotely at the same time is mind-blowing. It would be so much easier to have teams stay in the States and complete all 3 races one after the other, rather than forcing them to leave to other countries just to return later on. Or moving the Canadian Grand Prix closer to the North American part of the calendar towards the end of the year, not right in the middle of the European section. In total, without flights home during weeks off, F1 teams flew over 133,570 kilometers in 2023. Take that in for a second, and think about how enormous that number is and how important and easily it could be reduced, benefiting everyone. Logistically speaking, the calendar is a mess, and although they are trying to make changes, there is still a lot of work that has to be done. Arguably the biggest problem with the F1 calendar is the races that are on the calendar. F1 and Liberty Media are insistent on adding street races to the calendar for one simple reason: money. In 2024, 8 of the 24 races, or 1/3, will be held on street circuits. The problem is that many of these street circuits are replacing traditional racing tracks that all fans love. Over the years, tracks like Sepang, Hockenheim, Paul Ricard, Portimao, Istanbul Park, and many others are no longer on the circuit, but the calendar keeps getting longer and longer. Just recently, it had been announced that starting in 2026, the Spanish Grand Prix, previously held in Barcelona, will be replaced by a street race held in Madrid. This is yet another example of Formula 1 straying away from traditional racing tracks to makeshift street races. There are some street races which make sense, and which don't even feel like true street races. Take Canada and Australia, for example. But then there are street races where they just close off the streets and call it a racetrack. Take Las Vegas and Monaco, for example, although Monaco gets a pass for its long, prestigious history. Street races on streets that aren't meant to be for racing bring huge problems to the circuit. There is a greater possibility of accidents or incidents on these types of circuits. A clear example of this was in Las Vegas last year, when a manhole destroyed Carlos Sainz's car and luckily didn't have greater consequences. Street circuits being more narrow than traditional racing circuits also often results in less overtaking. Monaco is notoriously known as a track where it is almost near impossible to overtake, but many cities pay huge amounts of monies to host F1 races, and the bottom line is, money talks in Formula 1. Formula 1 is a business at the end of the day, and fans can complain all they want, but as long as the cash keeps coming in, no big changes will be made. With an upcoming 24 races next season, it can feel like the season is becoming a little oversaturated. When there are fewer races, there's excitement and anticipation for the next race, as well as a chance to process and actually feel what happened in the previous race. There is no chance to digest and break everything that happened down if there are 3 races in 3 weekends. There's also no chances for teams to make significant changes from one race to the next if they are so close together. As a fan, it sometimes feels like races are being forced down our necks, without giving us time to digest the previous ones. At first, this is great, because our favorite part of Formula 1 is the racing itself. But with time, the excitement factor disappears. Add to this all of the sprint races that are now part of the calendar, and you realize how overcrowded it truly has become. At this point, it will be hard to drastically reduce the length of the F1 calendar, especially since there are so many tracks with contracts and they are fighting to keep their spot on the calendar. But if Formula 1 does decide to reduce the number of races in the future, the fans will certainly be happy and engagement will go up as well. Planning out an entire F1 season is no easy task, and no matter how it is planned out, someone is bound to be unhappy. But one thing is for sure, Formula 1 and Liberty Media should at least take into account what fans are saying. To add to that, if they truly do want to fix some of their logistical issues, they can truly try to make some changes that will help towards this direction. Because at the end of the day, the calendar itself and the schedule is one of the most important factors for drivers, teams, and fans alike. So if there are to be changes to a very problematic calendar in the future, I'm sure many people would benefit. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to let me know what your thoughts on the F1 calendar are down below. Do you like the calendar? Do you like that we have so many races? Or would you also look in towards changing this in the future? As always, make sure to subscribe if you did enjoy the video and want to see more content like this in the future. And thank you guys again. See you next time. Bye.